Hi and welcome to my channel. I find it a lot of fun and a lot of excitement, but also a stressful time to move to another country. I have done it quite a few times. I moved from Germany to Austria and back. I moved from Germany to London in the UK and then from London to Singapore and back. And now I moved from London to Sweden. In this video, I want to give you a few tips about moving to Sweden. Some tips might be a little bit more general when you move countries, and some will be very specific for Sweden. If you're new to my channel, my name is Julie and I'm originally from Germany. In the past 10 years, I have lived in London, UK, and then almost 4 months ago, I moved to Stockholm, Sweden. So let's get started with tip number 1. Do your research. I find that actually quite fun, and I'm sure most of you are doing that already. There's obviously many areas where you can do research. You can do research into housing, how easy or difficult it is to find a job, if you need any visas or any paperwork. You want to look into healthcare and also like just in general the society or the climate. What I found actually most useful is Facebook groups. There are lots of Facebook groups for anything and everything in this world. And I joined a few Facebook groups before I actually moved. You know, there are Facebook groups like Brits in Sweden, Germans in Sweden, expats in Sweden, these kind of groups. And I really recommend joining one or all of them. But I have to give you a word of warning. There are lots of different opinions, lots of different people commenting, and everyone's experience and journey is quite different. You have to be careful not to take everyone by their word. I'm not saying they are lying, but you know, when you post online, humankind tends to be a little bit more negative than positive. I also felt that some people were on a mission to make other people, aware of the realities of the country. But again, this reality is sometimes their point of view and doesn't necessarily has to apply to you. So while I find them very useful and I'm listening to everything, I still form my own opinion, and I'm very well aware that each country has its obstacles. It's never super easy just to move to a country and everything will be perfect. So yeah, do your research, join Facebook groups, read articles, read blog posts, but still stick to what you believe, who you are and what is important to you. And it might be different sometimes from other people. And then my second tip would be to keep your old life a little bit longer. And by that, I mean not to cancel everything in your home country or wherever you lived before, because setting up a new life in a new country can come with, obstacles, delays. If you don't have a bank account in your former country and you don't have a bank account in the new country, I mean, that is a big issue. So normally, I would keep my bank account. I would still be registered in that country. Obviously, you have to see if you need to, if that's a requirement. There are obviously different rules you have to also look at. And often you also still have your health insurance in your country, or you have a health insurance for abroad. You have to take care of that before you are able to set up everything in the new country. And that might not apply for every country, but definitely for Sweden. I know in the UK, the NHS is actually free and it didn't really require any registration for me. But here in Sweden, you definitely have to go through a process, which I talk in a second. But yeah, after a while, this could be weeks or months, I would cancel certain things, especially if they involved a fee or if they were required for me to cancel. And then it also depends on your own life. Do you visit your home country very often? Does it make sense maybe to still have a bank account there? These kind of things are very individual, and you have to decide for yourself what you need to keep alive and what you want to just shut down, basically. When it comes to bank, I'm actually quite glad I set up like a different kind of bank account system, and that is with Revolut. That exists in many countries, so it might be also good for you. It's a newer bank and it basically gives you the opportunity not to pay so many fees like you normally do with a bank. I'm with HSBC, and every time I'm paying for something with my card, or if obviously I get some cash out, which I haven't actually here in Sweden in the past 4 months. So everything I pay is with a card. There's always a fee. It like starts maybe from 50p and could be a couple of pounds. I find that really crazy and it can really add up. So with Revolut, you don't really pay any fees unless you pay for something over £100, but then the fee is still smaller than what you would pay with your traditional bank. So yeah, I would definitely look into something like that in your country. It could be Revolut, it could be something similar, but the newer banks are, they just tailored a little bit to the new life where people are moving around and try to really give you the benefits which traditional banks just don't have in place yet, maybe. My next tip would be to have a financial buffer. So moving countries could be very expensive. It depends obviously on your personal circumstances. Maybe you're just a single, you might travel light, you don't have any furniture, and maybe just have a suitcase, then it might be not that expensive. But if you move with a whole family, then it could get a little bit more expensive. But yeah, there are other things you have to bear in mind. If you, for example, rent a place and it doesn't have any furniture, then you have to buy something. You have to bear in mind all the bureaucratic fees you have to pay. And also, a little bit of adjustment, maybe depending also where you're coming from. The groceries or transport could be more expensive than in your country. And personally, also, I really need to get into the flow, finding what is cheaper, where can I save some money over time. So at the beginning, it's very likely that you just spend more money. Even when you're very fortunate and your company, you're maybe moving because of a job, pays for accommodation or for the move, there are still many expenses you have to bear in mind, expected expenses or unexpected expenses. It's really good to have a bit of a financial buffer, not to stress out, because the whole move and the first few months, in my opinion, are quite stressful. There's a lot of adjustment going on, so it's good to at least have a bit of a financial security. And the next tip is quite specific to Sweden, where you have to take care of all the bureaucratic to-dos. Yes, of course, other countries have the same, but I moved quite a few times and I found Sweden was actually the most to do. I moved to Austria, which I told you before, and to be fair, it's quite similar, at least it's the same language. It's in the EU as well, and I'm an EU citizen. I can't remember doing any bureaucratic stuff. And then even moving to the UK, which at the time I moved was also still in the EU. So there was nothing really I had to do apart from just registering. And I can't even remember if I did it, in an agency, in a building, or if I could do that just online. The fact that I forgot about it tells me that it wasn't difficult at all. And even moving to Singapore, and that was really surprising, I had nearly nothing to do bureaucratically. Of course, there was a visa I had to get before I moved to Singapore. But once I was in Singapore, I just applied for jobs. And once I had a job, the workplace did everything else for me. I think I got a bank account straight away, definitely before the first paycheck, because I remember this was paid to my Singaporean bank. It seemed very, very smooth and almost nothing to do. And here we are in Sweden. Maybe times have changed as well, I don't know. I can only tell you from my experience. But yeah, it's the most I had to do since moving to another country. The bureaucratic things to do here is quite a bit. So let's start with the first thing you have to do straight away, and that's registering for your personnummer. And this is a Swedish identity number you get, and with that normally your whole life in Sweden runs. You can normally easily open a bank account, you can pay with Bank ID or Swish, which you also only can set up with your personnummer. If you want to register your child in nursery, it's also very easy to have your personnummer. And whatever you register for, actually, people will ask you for your personnummer. Even if you get a SIM card for your mobile phone, they will also ask you for a personnummer. Yes, sometimes there are ways around it and you can negotiate, or there are ways some companies have set up an interim solution. But in general, if you want an easy life, then the personnummer is basically everything. But to be fair, I should probably say the first thing you really need is an accommodation. And I definitely recommend to go with Airbnb because it's very unlikely that you find a rental property before you move. I already mentioned that in a few of my other videos, that the scamming here is quite a thing in Sweden. So you might pay a deposit for a rental property and then the keys don't fit, that kind of stuff. So that can happen here. So the best is really to come here to stay in a hotel or in an Airbnb and then to look for rental properties. But also because you have to register for the personnummer, it's quite important you have an address. So you could either ask your Airbnb host to use the address, or maybe if you have friends or relatives in Sweden already, then it would also make sense to maybe ask them if you can use their address at the beginning until you find a rental property, and then later on you can change your address. It's not ideal, I have to say, when you move to a country. Not everyone has a rental property or, can buy a house or a flat straight away. So basically has not an address straight away, but you do want to register for the personnummer as soon as possible because the process can take a while, especially now to Corona times is still quite delayed. So all these things you have to bear in mind, but maybe one day if you watch this video, it's years after I'm recording this and Corona is finally over, let's hope so, and then maybe the process doesn't take as long. Yeah, and once you have the personnummer, there are a few other steps you have to follow. You get an ID card and then you can set up your bank ID. So from there are a few other things you have to take care of, but hopefully they are not as painful as the first big step. So yeah, I would try to open a bank account. I mentioned this in a video as well before. It is possible to set up a bank account without the personnummer. You just really have to try to find the right bank and probably the right person, because having a bank account in Sweden definitely helps. And my last tip would be to prepare mentally and try to stay relaxed when you're moving to Sweden. From my experience, having moved quite a few times, I always found that the first few months are the hardest, and no matter how much I prepared, it was still hard because still things are coming up. I think you can prepare as much as you want. There is still a bit of a difference between the theory, the preparation and what you imagine, versus the reality, which doesn't have to necessarily be gloomy, but because you're just moving to another country, there's a lot of things you have to adapt to, even if it's a European country. Not every country is the same. So yeah, having this transition and adapting to a lot of new things is just a bit stressful. And I personally have accepted that the first few months are always a bit difficult. I cry a little bit and then I just move on. For me, for example, one of the most important parts of my happiness is a good social life. And when you move countries, you pretty much have to start from scratch. Even I know a few people here in Sweden, but that doesn't really define that I already have a great social life. I still want to meet people. And one of my biggest friends is actually the internet. I have done that many times when I moved. I always try to connect with people online and also offline. Yes, it can take some time, but it always worked for me to build up a social life slowly. Especially in Sweden, I read a lot of comments that people are reserved or that people really struggle to make friends. But I think Swedish people are no difference to any other people in other countries. They are quite social, they want to have friends, they care about their family. So I don't think that is the issue. It's just that you have to put a little bit of effort, into meeting some people. This could be at work, or you can pick up a hobby and meeting people regularly, and then slowly getting in touch with people and talking with them. Obviously, learning the language probably helps as well. So there are many things you can do, but obviously you can't just do everything in 1 week or 2 or even in a few months. This takes a little bit of time, and I think here it's just the most important part is to be patient and just to keep going. I hope you enjoyed these tips. If you have any questions, then leave a comment down below and I hopefully will be able to answer your questions. Thanks so much for watching till the end, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Have a great day and stay safe. Hej då!